Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the January 25th, 2024 Thurston County Board of Commissioners work session. I am Vice Chair Wayne Fournier. In the room, we have Commissioner Emily Klaus. On Zoom, we have Commissioners Ty Menser and Commissioner Mejia. And today we are talking about Thurston Regional Trails Plan Update Presentation. I will invite Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell to open the discussion.
Thank you, Commissioner. This morning we are joined by members of TRPC and our Public Works Trails team to talk about the overview from TRPC on the Regional Trails Plan. I'm going to turn it right over to you.
Great, thank you, Robin. Good morning, Commissioners. By way of introduction, I'm Paul Brewster, Senior Planner with Thurston Regional Planning Council, and I'm happy to come here today to talk to you about the TRPC Regional Trails Plan. And so, give me a minute. Let me pull up the screen with the presentation, get that started. Hopefully you can all see that screen in your virtual environments. So Thurston Regional Planning Council really kicked off the Regional Trails Plan in earnest in 2020, late 2020, and the council adopted the Trails Plan on December 1st, just last year. And today I'd like to give you an overview of this plan, what the contents are, what its purpose is, for your familiarity for what's in this plan for county trails, as well as just having an awareness of what's in our regional trails network to help you further communicate with constituents in your districts. So this is a TRPC plan. And a little bit about the context. So Thurston Regional Planning Council is the metropolitan planning organization, a federal designation for coordinating transportation planning between local, state, and federal agencies. And we're also the designated regional transportation planning organization to ensure that local governments' comprehensive plans all have a consistent approach with TRPC's regional transportation plan and guiding future transportation. So often when we think about trails, a lot of types of facilities can come to mind, but I specifically want to talk about what we refer to in the transportation sector as multi-use trails or shared use paths. These are like paved trails, as you're familiar with the Chehalis Western, the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail, Karen Fraser Woodland Trail. So these trails both sort of cross and serve the community with recreation. People like to get out, use trails for health, fitness, just socialization, but also for transportation. People rely on trails for people who prefer to or really without other choices get around by bike or on foot in their community on these pathways. So we like to think of our shared use trail network. That is all the jurisdictions' trails and how they come together and coordinate it as being a regional system. And the plan is designed to help our communities better coordinate the development, the expansion, ongoing maintenance and operation of these facilities, kind of as a whole. And so the additional context for this is Washington State Department of Transportation has developed an active transportation plan. So WashDOT is really recognizing that multimodal transportation is key to people's mobility. It's part of an effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as charged through the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan. And the Regional Transportation Plan wants to increase the share of people making trips by biking and walking. So shared use trails are just part of that overall network. So these next two slides could really kind of summarize for you everything I want to talk about. So we can decide after that if you want to keep going, but I'll keep providing some additional information. We have today on the ground nearly 60 miles of trails that are open to the public. summed up in around 14 corridors, broad corridors, either north, south, east, west. There's 9 entities that own the trail network, but actually 8 agencies that do the majority of the ongoing maintenance and operation of the facilities.
Can I jump in real quick? Sorry, Commissioner Edwards is in the waiting room, and I
Oh.
think that you might have to be the one to admit him.
I can do
Thank you
that.
so much.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Today, approximately 2020 census numbers, approximately 37,000 people live within a half mile of an existing developed trail.
When you say 9 trail owners, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so that's cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston County, Washington Department of Transportation, the Chehalis tribe, the Nisqually tribe, and others.
Those are all part of that same network.
Consider them part of the network.
Awesome.
So what we're planning for in the plan is expanding this network with 170 miles of trails, going from 14 to 16 corridors, still the same number of owners and operators. But if we were to build out this network by 2045, approximately 160,000 people would live within a half mile of that network. That would be about 42% of Thurston County's forecasted population. So that's very aspirational. What you see on this slide is the green corridors are the existing trail network, and the dashed blue is sort of what we're proposing. And I'm gonna break down that number of 170 miles further into the presentation on what share of that is within Thurston County jurisdiction, that is. So how did we go about developing the plan? Our baseline was the 2007 Regional Trails Plan. We inventoried trail facilities working with our partners, including Thurston County Public Works. We worked closely with Ed and Shannon and Becky Kahn and Matt Unzelman to collect data about the county's trails, working with city partners. We did a broad-based community survey in early 2021. We actually put signs out on the trail network. We had about 1,200 responses from the community asking people about what their preferences were, how we as communities should invest what resources we have in maintaining and developing the network. We posed a questionnaire to local agency staff about how they maintain their facilities, how they budget for it, what level of routine maintenance are they performing on the network. We formed an advisory committee that consisted of both community-based representatives from like Morningside, Providence St. Peter Hospital, local government staff to kind of provide input on the plan's goals, policies, recommendations. And of course, we gleaned through jurisdictions' plans to find out what's in the pipeline for trail projects, what's coming up. Not just the trails themselves, but also restroom facilities, trailheads, and things that help enhance that network. And finally, we had a draft public comment period in October last year. It was like late September through October to get community feedback, and I'll touch on some of that. I want to point out before I progress that the presentation I have on the projector varies slightly from what was in your packet. So I updated this presentation to have a little more focus on Thurston County itself. So I'm not going to go into depth, but there is an executive summary, provides that nice high-level overview, an introduction that explains the basis for why we plan. What are the benefits of trails as far as benefits to the environment, benefits to the health of our community, supporting and promoting non-motorized transportation. So I'm going to touch a little bit more on the next few slides on the remaining chapters that are in here from the existing conditions through the appendix of corridor details. So the existing conditions is our baseline. It describes who owns and operates the trails, what condition are those facilities in, what are the types of amenities, benches, restrooms, trailheads, wayfinding signage, lighting, condition of pavement. It describes who lives near the trails, age, income level, demographics, just to get a sense of who has immediate access to the trails in our community. It talks about how trails connect to neighborhoods, to parks, to desired community destinations. And then we have data on all the existing shared use trails on what is the utilization. How many people are actually using the trail network?
My old house is just to the left in that picture.
Yeah.
And my daughter and I would sit on the front porch and watch the sled dogs on the trail. That was like one of our favorite things. People would bring out like huskies and they'd pull themselves on sleds it was pretty fun. Get all teary-eyed.
So here we are looking at the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail. Tenino on the far bottom left corner of the image and Yelm up in the upper right-hand corner. And what we're looking at here is data that, let me back up and say, something we don't have is a really good understanding of what the utilization is or how many people are using the trails throughout the year, because we really don't have a system of going out and counting.
I was trying to get Carrie to put a traffic counter, but I wanted him to do it during STP. He was like, come on.
There is one permanent infrared counter right at the intersection of the Chehalis Western and Karen Fraser Woodland Trail. It was installed by WashDOT. It counts warm bodies. It's up all the time. There's a data dashboard that people could log into. It doesn't have public access, but transportation staff can log in and see what the use is, and it differentiates between pedestrians and bicyclists. Very neat. TRPC obtained a data source, street light data that uses people's cell phones, and it just is pinging people's phones to be able to detect who's at a particular location, and it can differentiate between someone who's walking or riding a bike based on the speed that they're traveling. It can also differentiate between whether someone's traveling in a car or even in, say, a bus, because if it's a cluster of people moving at the same rate on a facility, it can differentiate that. So what we see on this slide here is that the greatest utilization for the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail is between the old Yelm City Hall right there at Yelm Avenue down to Wilkowski Park in Rainier. The thickness of the line shows the greater the utilization. Here we're showing the Chehalis Western Trail, which is the most popular trail in Thurston County. This is a Thurston County trail. I don't need to say that in here, but for the sake of perhaps viewers, it has the highest utilization of any trail in Thurston County, especially that segment that's between basically Pacific Avenue south to Yelm Highway. And if you can't see the screen, right north of Yelm Highway on an average daily volume between June and August 2021, there's an average of 551 people walking on the trail and 418 people biking on that segment. So those are fairly big numbers that are using this on an average day. And then the circle here is just to highlight that where you have a trailhead, which is really key because not everybody can walk or bike to the trail. People do need to drive to transport their bikes, take the family, or maybe hitch up horses in a trailer. Where you do have those trailheads like the Fir Tree Road trailhead, you do start to see a larger share of numbers on that trail. And so south of Yelm Highway, that segment between Fir Tree Road and Waldrick Road is the most used segment of the Chehalis Western Trail. So really useful to have this type of utilization data to assist like the county planners being able to plan for future expansion of trailheads and where there might be demand for new parking in the future. So of course the plan has visions, goals, and policies. When I first started at TRPC in late 90s, when Thurston County still had a Parks Department, the Parks Department director at the time, that the vision for Thurston County Trails was to connect every community in Thurston County to the Puget Sound. And the Chehalis Western Trail was the backbone to get people to Woodard Bay. For our regional trails plan, our vision is the region's trails network is first-rate, accessible, expandable, and effectively maintained. The network provides safe and enjoyable recreation and active transportation for all users, connecting all Thurston County communities. So today, not all Thurston County communities are really tied in or even connect to the Puget Sound. We're aspiring to do that with this plan. Some may think this plan is not aspirational enough. We think it's very aspirational considering how long it takes to build out a network. For example, the Bridging the Gap project, which was the bridges on the the bridges on the Chehalis Western Trail that crossed I-5, Martin Way, and Pacific Avenue was like 12 years to construct those 3 bridges. So these things take time and effort and coordination among communities to do.
You mentioned kind of like the initial selling of this, of the trails in like 97. I still have some of the mock-ups that were like brought to the communities, and they were elaborate. So like when this was first sold, it was very aspirational, and the kind of the trailhead concept that was sold to Tenino was, I mean, it was building out parking lots, it was helping, you know, like move the park into like a major trailhead piece, and I mean, we kind of like lost, I think, part of that, because initially when it was sold to all the communities around Thurston County, it was like, this is a big thing. And I mean, if you were to look at those mock-ups now, you'd be like, they're impressive, but like
You
certainly
didn't achieve
kind of,
that. That's
yeah,
what you're
yeah.
saying.
I mean, we were shooting for the moon, and we've kind of forgot that, I think.
So there's 5 goals in the plan. These are sort of like our policy emphasis areas. A connected and accessible network is about how do we expand our network? How do we connect it to where people live, to neighborhoods, to parks, to desired community destinations? How can people get to it? Trailheads are a key component of that connected and accessible network. A user-friendly network is ensuring that all permitted uses have sort of that same fair, equal access to the trail. When I say it's multi-use, it's cyclists, it's pedestrians, it's people roller skating, it's the family walking the dog, it's someone out for a jog. In unincorporated parts of Thurston County, it's people wanting to be able to ride horseback on the trails. In addition, it's about wayfinding signage. It's about people knowing, having the trails be predictable, that when they get on it, they know where they can go, they know where they're at. And even in a virtual environment, people want to be able to plan their routes. So maybe they want to go to the website and look for information. Perhaps there's social media campaigns that are announcing events about trails and things like that. So people just know that it's user-friendly and they can find information. Safe and secure is really key. People want to know that when they're on the trail, not just safe in terms of traffic and avoiding collisions, but being safe from physical harm, from potential criminal behavior or nuisance behavior, or making sure that there's no natural hazards along the trail, risk of limbs falling on the trail, or bumps in the trail surface or debris that might cause a fall and injury. Collaborative effort is really what's at the heart of this plan, and that's really trying to pull jurisdictions together to have this sort of common vision and sense of unity to make this trail network across jurisdictional boundaries. Because when you're driving in your car down the road, let's say Pacific Avenue here, do you really know? I mean, some of us do. When you cross from Lacey to Olympia, that network should be seamless. You want to know that that facility is going to perform the same for you regardless of what jurisdiction there is. Yeah, there should be some sense of place and unique identity across jurisdictions, but people just want the system to function seamlessly. And that's where collaborative effort really comes into play, so that local agency partners can come together and discuss what are the emerging issues and challenges that perhaps they can work on together, which is a good segue for a well-maintained network. One of the chief preferences or priorities out of our 2021 survey is that community members, those respondents, weighed in that we need to be able to maintain what we've already built, that it's key that we be able to take care of what we have. I'm going to talk a little bit more about maintenance, but this includes both sort of like the routine maintenance that like Public Works does with going out and sweeping and clearing debris and emptying garbage cans and removing graffiti and just making sure that the trail's in a good state of repair. But it's also that sort of long-term asset management of maintaining that trail pavement in good condition as long as you can in the most cost-effective manner. So there are 33 policy recommendations that are tied to the plan goals. And these policy recommendations, aside, they're different from the project recommendations, and it's more about the coordination. Like, what are things, TRPC is recommending actions for TRPC, it's recommending actions for those organizations that manage our trail network to make it better for connectivity, accessibility, user-friendliness, safety, security, collaboration, as well as maintenance. I'm gonna kind of talk about the projects. There's 51 total project recommendations, from trail expansion to construction of new trailheads to construction of new restrooms, just these capital investments that jurisdictions have planned. There's other project recommendations to do additional studies, to do feasibility studies, because we have some pretty wild ideas for trails in this plan that may not come to fruition, but we're really not going to know what the feasibility of those opportunities are until we take a closer look. So this plan is recommending, hey, we have these conceptual trails. Let's take a closer look, because people like trails to loop. It can be, people don't always just want to walk one way and turn around and walk back the other way. They want to be able to connect and circulate within the community. So these are the total miles of county trails that are trails that are identified in the plan. I don't need to describe existing, that's what's on the ground. But planned is those trail segments where some feasibility study has been done. So a good example of that is the Gate Belmore Trail Corridor. TRPC awarded Thurston County about $43,000 to evaluate what is it going to take to develop the Gate Belmore Trail Corridor. And the Gate Belmore extends from really the south end of Black Lake down to the unincorporated area of Thurston County Gate, just northwest of Rochester. County's owned that right-of-way for nearly 30 years. It has some real challenges with old creosote railroad trestles across water bodies. There's threatened species, listed species in those water bodies. So it's a really delicate balance to develop that trail with meeting the needs of the public with trails and protecting the environment. Proposed are those trails that are identified in a plan. There's been some discussion of it, it's known, but there really hasn't been any further work to evaluate what needs to be done. And conceptual is what I talked about earlier, sort of those wild ideas where you look at between the Chehalis Western Trail and the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail and the Gate Belmore Trail, and it's like, boy, it would really be nice to have some type of east-west connection between here to close those gaps. What would that take? Here's an area we should take a closer look at. So today, Thurston County maintains about 66% of the region of the trail network. In the future, if we were to fully build this out, and I think 2045 would be very optimistic, we're looking at the county having a total of nearly 100 miles of trails. Again, it would still have the lion's shares of shared use trails. So we're not suggesting in this plan that the county just go out and build all this. This plan doesn't have any thou shalt do this. It's saying, have this vision, how we could potentially grow this network. Here are the corridors and the routes, and here's the jurisdictions and their areas of responsibility.
Has there ever been any talk or consider, the rail line that kind of intersects between, I don't know, it goes by off a lake, kind of right through the middle of the county, and it's an unused rail line. Has there ever been any consideration of including that in any future planning?
I think there's been discussions, but not really any momentum to memorialize that in a plan. And I would defer to my county colleagues too to respond to any questions that come up. So some of these trails, for example, the Tumwater to downtown Olympia Union Pacific Corridor, Thurston County has 3.6 miles of that, but also Tumwater has a share of those miles too. It's just not shown on this screen. So funding, this is the challenge. Where does the money come from to develop the trail? So since the 2007 Regional Trails Plan was adopted, TRPC has awarded, as part of its Federal Highway Administration apportioned funds to trail projects, about $4.3 million worth. Prior to that, TRPC also awarded over $1 million towards the Bridging the Gap project, in addition to TRPC, Thurston County, City of Olympia, Lacey, and the region coming together to work towards congressional requests. So former Congressman Brian Baird was instrumental in getting that funding to do the I-5 bridge crossing as part of the Shalis Western. Beyond TRPC, as a region, our local agencies have received $5.3 million in WashDOT awarded pedestrian and bicycle grant programs. Not all this is necessarily for trails, but it's about multimodal connectivity, sidewalks, bike lanes, safe routes to school type projects that do have that opportunity to make those connections to our trail network. Real opportunity with the bipartisan infrastructure law for active transportation projects. I think what we need is to have trails that are close to that shovel-ready state. Trails where the right-of-way is secured. We can check the box on some of those, but where preliminary engineering and design work has been completed, not fully there on everything, but getting those projects to that next state so we can make those legislative requests through either the state legislature or Congress for additional funding that we as a region collectively think should be a priority for expanding our network. So how do we keep the momentum going? The plan identifies for TRPC to establish a regional trails planning work group. This would be akin to TRPC's technical advisory committee. This would consist of both local government trail experts, those involved with planning, programming, trail projects, with the day-to-day operation and maintenance of these facilities, to be able, and community-based representatives to be able to advise TRPC on what are best practices, maybe what are opportunities for funding. It can also serve as a peer network among the trail managing agencies just to discuss, help troubleshoot issues on emerging problems on the trail network. TRPC would convene an annual regional trail meeting. This would be more of a public-facing meeting to engage the community at large with, hey, what are the projects in the pipeline? What's coming up? What is going on?
I believe Commissioner Menzer may have had a question.
Ty, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, my question was on funding, and I just, since we went past that, I was just going to double back. But all I was going to say was that when staff, yesterday, we talked about exploring the conservation REIT and how that would apply to parks. And I would like staff to further brief the board on how that would connect to trails, if it would, so that when we consider that proposal, we'll know if it can help us achieve what Paul's describing, because I'm very interested in trying to make this real and not just a plan.
Excellent, thank you.
Yeah, anyone else, if they see a hand pop up and I miss it, I appreciate you letting me know. Lastly is TRPC updating the plan every 5 years. The last plan was done in 2007, recent adopted in 2023. Our Transportation Policy Board council member and members of the community are saying that's too long. We need to revisit the plan more frequently and update it. In fact, in the community survey, there were some people who said you should update it every 2 years. And of course, it'd be my preference not to do that because that's just more work for me. I think what's at the heart of the plan, I think the most interesting part of the plan, it's sort of like it's the appendix of corridor details. And this is sort of like the field guide to the existing and proposed trail network as to what's out there. And it has this alphanumeric index system on the trail network where you go in to see what are the projects, how are we looking to expand the network. So here's an example of the Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail System. And the part that you're all familiar with is from Tenino to Yelm. And part of that system is proposing to expand it to the town of Bucota. TRPC, Tenino, Bucota, and Thurston County partnered on a trail feasibility study back in 2018 to look at evaluating what would it take to expand from Tenino City Park south to Bucota, as well as expanding that trail from the park out to west Tenino city limits. That's the Tenino Trail. And in this process, we said, you know, we're doing a feasibility study to look at a potential shared use corridor alignment from Grand Mound to Rochester. Perhaps there needs to be some further, a closer look at how would we expand that trail network from Tenino to Grand Mound. So that's that conceptual segment, 15F. But what you see here is who's the lead, who are the partners, description of the location and where the projects associated with that corridor. Where we have cost estimates, we publish them in the plan. Not all of these corridors have this level of detail. Getting close to the end here on my presentation. So we did launch a community survey for public comment on the plan that ran from like mid-September to October 9th. And there's Executive Director Mark Daly. He rode his bike out.
I was like, who is that?
So he was so excited to ride his e-bike from home down the Chehalis. He did the full Chehalis Western Trail and Yelm Rainier Tenino Trail on his bike, putting out trail signs. And so we had a QR code on here. We had 1,157 responses. We had 1,200 responses on our 2021 survey, so real similar results. I think these trail signs were the real key to get people involved in participating in the survey. So I just want to highlight some points from the survey. So who responded? You know, who responded to the survey isn't exactly representative of everyone who's in the community, so it's not statistically significant. However, it did provide useful information. 10% were people of color, but 90% were non-Hispanic white. Kind of a split on gender who responded. Most of the people who responded were between 40 to 69 years old. The majority of the residents lived in a city or town, but 97% of respondents resided in Thurston County. Most of the respondents had a household income of $75,000 or more. So we asked some questions. What should TRPC be focusing on with this plan as far as what our funding priorities should be? So 2 in 3 respondents want TRPC to prioritize more funding for constructing trails. They said, yes, that's a good idea. TRPC should be asking local agencies to submit proposals as part of our federal funding call for projects to expand the network when it's ready, when it's feasible. Let's build out this network to connect more people in our communities. Regardless of survey respondents' race, ethnicity, age, and income, these 3 trails were the top 3 priorities of respondents, and that is the Deschutes Valley Trail. This is the trail corridor that runs from X Street in Tumwater to Brewery Park. They're saying that should be a priority. The Gate Belmore Trail in Thurston County, as I described earlier, should be a priority. And the Karen Fraser Woodland Trail, extending it from its current terminus at East Side Street all the way to the western shore at Capitol Lake and Tumwater to connect to the Deschutes Valley Trail. All of these are expensive projects. They want us to be more intentional with our planning. 95% of respondents supported those TRPC recommendations of establishing this advisory work group, holding this annual meeting, and updating the trails plan every 5 years. But they're saying there needs to be continued and ongoing and greater community engagement. People want to be involved with the planning process. And I think it goes beyond the planning process. People want to feel some ownership in the trail network. They want to help be stewards of it. They want to be involved with maybe going out and helping with doing planting events on the trail, to do trail cleanup days. They want to figure out how they can be involved, but they want to have awareness of what is going on. They want to have a voice in how trails are designed that might serve their part of the community. As far as enhancing the network goes, people placed an emphasis on improving trail street crossings at hazardous locations. They didn't say specifically necessarily which hazardous locations, but clearly our trail network crosses street locations. There's stop signs where trail users stop, and there's signs on the road that warn motorists that there's a trail crossing ahead. But people want to see some more visible, more formalized, some more intentional type of safe street crossings. In planning for more and constructing trail supportive facilities, lighting, restrooms, signage, furniture out on the trail, bike racks, things of that sort. The top 5 themes, just general. We had some open-ended questions for other things that people would want to weigh in on, and these were the top 5 themes. Connectivity, not just how shared use trails connect one community to another, but how communities overall connect, how that people can make a greater share of getting around their communities on foot or riding a bike, that they want to have safer spaces to walk in. So even if they're not on a trail, if you say live in an unincorporated county, you see people out walking on the shoulder of the road, walking their dog. They want to feel safe doing that. So they want that additional space, that enhancement that's dedicated for those types of activities. Trail maintenance. I don't want to belabor this, but people want the trails to be in a state of good repair. I think that probably the most popular feedback was about root intrusion in the bumps in the trails. That creates a hazard for trail users, and it lessens their experience in using the trails. Security, concerns about car prowls at trailheads, concerns about people being assaulted on the trail, especially from women feeling unsafe on the trail, which is probably true no matter where women are, whether they're in park or on the trail. There's just that general feeling of a feeling of fearfulness. User conflict reduction. This is about, you have people who are walking dogs on a leash and a bicyclist is coming, and the bicyclist doesn't like the dog being on a leash because it gets in their way. People who are walking who don't like e-bikers on the trail because they travel too fast and they're concerned about being in a collision. Everyone feels that how they use the trail is the most important way that they should use the trail. And this is about how can, through education, through modeling, through information on signs, on websites, through maybe community events, create this culture about how we should all act civilly and safely and smile at each other and say hello when we're on the trail and go out there and enjoy it. So there are concerns about user conflict reduction, but principally around speed. And just, we have a proliferation of e-bikes that are emerging in our community because they become more affordable, the technology is getting better. And let's face it, it's a lot easier for people to get around on e-bikes.
We don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing, but just how do we work with it? How do we manage it? So should there be a maximum speed limit on the trail? That sort of sets the stage so that no matter what user you are, yeah, how would you enforce that? Which goes back to that education and just building a culture of civility on the trail network. Not an easy thing to do. And the county's experimented with this. When they first developed the trail, they painted stripes, center lines on the trail network to divide users, and you stay on this side and we stay on this side. There's signs that say keep right, pass on the left. All good things, but I'm sure Ed can attest to, he's probably fielding calls and emails
I don't
probably
remember
every
where
day about
I think I was
someone
like Venice
complaining.
Beach or something, and I was riding like an e-scooter. And as soon as I got a little too close to the beach, the scooter like automatically from like magic from a satellite dropped down like 5 miles an hour. Like, so there's technology out there that exists as well to limit those things.
And so this would be some of this role of this Trails Advisory Work Group. So local agency staff could come together with community members and just try to identify potential opportunities to resolve these conflicts through work programs, through signage, things like that. And of course, we'll keep talking about funding, need for increased funding to implement these recommendations and expand the network. So that's what I have for you today. I'm happy to take questions. I don't have it up here on my slide, but if you want to view the plan or just check out the executive summary, it's on our website at trpc.org/trails, if you remember.
Can you pull that down so we can see? I believe Commissioner Mejia has her hand up.
I do. I have a couple of questions, Paul. I was waiting towards the end. Thank you so much for being here and presenting this information. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but I do have a question. Your last slide in terms of trail usability, and it made me chuckle when I went to the National Association of Counties. I went to a session specifically for trails, and it was funny to hear for counties all around the U.S. that they're facing the same issues that we are in terms of, there's conflicts with walkers versus bikers, and, electric bikes, and they're going too fast, and some of the same complaints that they were saying were the same ones that I know our staff have heard, that I, as a commissioner, have heard from constituents. So thank you for bringing awareness to that. I have a question in regards to the funding piece of it. It sounds great, right? Investing in our trails, the maintenance and operations, but what are we taking away from when we're doing this?
That's a great question. It's a philosophical question in some ways. What I can say is one of the recommendations in our plan is for TRPC staff to work through the TAC and other partners to evaluate a funding set aside from TRPC's federal transportation allocation to award to priority transportation projects, to do a set aside specifically for trail pavement preservation here in Thurston County to maintain what we have. And there's a few grant programs we could use to do that. We have our Surface Transportation Block Grant. We have our Transportation Alternatives, which is a set aside of that grant program. And the new Congestion Reduction Program funds. And to do that, if we were to create this set aside and look to program out doing a repaver project on a section of, say, the Chehalis Western Trail in 2028, how does that set aside then impact the competitiveness of other proposals that our community would want to perhaps see? Maybe another bicycle pedestrian sidewalk along a roadway. Perhaps it could impact Intercity Transit's walk and roll program that does youth education and encouragement around traffic safety and encouraging youth to walk, ride the bike, or take the bus to school. So it does have impacts. As policymakers, you need to make decisions about what your priorities are for funding. But the majority of our funding that we invest in transportation is going to the road network. And our surveys demonstrate that community members would like to see a greater share of that funding going towards the upkeep and expansion of our trail network, because it does align with other community priorities, as I described in the beginning, with health, wellness, recreation, reducing greenhouse gases, reducing vehicle miles traveled.
Commissioner Edwards?
Oh.
Oh, sorry, Caroline. Sorry, Commissioner Mejia, did you have a follow-up?
I did. Can I ask it? Do we have time?
I think we got I could talk about this all day. We could cancel the rest of the meeting.
There is time.
Okay, I just wanted to ask, just as a follow-up, thank you for that. In terms of the strings attached to federal funding, right? Usually there, it comes with certain, and I'm just wondering, with this funding that, we're thinking about, what are there going to be additional requirements that we're going to have to jump through in order to access that funding to use it for this specific purpose?
For federal funding for trails,
Yes.
I'm not aware of any new strings attached, but in general with using federal funding, there's a adage that says it's easier to get federal funding than it is to spend it. Our partners typically want to propose larger projects that they want to federalize to make it more cost effective to implement those projects with federal funding. That is a challenge. So if we do a set aside for trails, it would likely be in the range of $1 million plus that we'd be setting aside to make it cost effective, say for the county or one of the cities to want to do a project. Beyond that, I would be looking to my Thurston County Public Works staff in the room to further chime in to speak to that challenge.
Okay.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, sir. I don't really have a question. I'd just like to compliment Paul for a great presentation with a lot of good information. And I think we're in pretty good hands with Paul from his regional perspective. And then Commissioner Fournier is kind of the cheerleader for this deal. So I feel we've got this pretty well covered. We just need to decide what the next move is at some point. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Commissioner Menser?
Thank you. I have two questions. One is, Paul, I didn't quite understand the forming a planning group and the annual meeting and the updating every 5 years. Is that happening, or that's a recommendation in the plan? Is it already funded, decided that that's going to happen?
I'll clarify that. So those are the recommendations in the plan. The recommendation, as we presented it to the council, is we're updating our regional transportation plan right now, and we expect to have that completed and adopted by 2025. So we're saying that is that's where we're setting the starting line for those three recommendations of establishing an advisory work group, convening the annual meeting, and that would be the launch point for then updating the trails plan in 5 years. TRPC staff is looking at, you got to be careful what you say in a plan, because now we have to find the funding to fund the work program, because this is like establishing another technical advisory committee where we need a lead staff to be doing the agenda setting, to be sending out the meeting invites, to be taking the notes, to be inviting and doing the recruitment of the advisory board. So we're going to be updating our transportation policy board about this year, about what our approach is. We have some options. One might be that TRPC submits a proposal to our own call for projects, the process that I manage at TRPC, but I won't be submitting the proposal. That is seeking funding to 5 years worth to be able to manage that advisory work group to recruit. Unfortunately, that funding we wouldn't be able to receive that funding until 2028. So that's too far out. So we would be looking to sort of set that aside for the future. For the more near term, we might also be looking at potentially using redistributed funding from local programs. That's federal funding that did not get obligated in the fiscal year that local programs from WashDOT would like to see obligated. So that's a potential funding source. So we're keeping our eyes open to be able to staff that, but not much is gonna happen this year, except for that one recommendation I mentioned earlier of evaluating this set aside for our 2024 call for projects for pavement preservation. Did that
Okay,
help?
thank you. Yeah, for sure. I mean, this board is very familiar with the challenges and the, you know, the difficulties getting new work groups set up, and we've done a bunch of them, and it's always a challenge. So I just wanted to see if I understood that. My second question is, you know, it seems like if every county had the vision and the you know, the ambition, I guess, that we have, and then we connect those those systems across county lines, we would have you know, you would just leverage like miles and miles of trails. I know there was a letter we were supposed to speak, like we signed on a few years ago, that was supposed to connect up to Pierce County. I don't know if Mason County or Lewis County or Grays Harbor counties have trail systems or anything near our borders. I mean, in my district, you know, connecting up to something in Mason County could be, you know, just incredible. And it's all beautiful forested land. I mean, I don't know. I've taken my family on bike rides in Lewis County. It's a little bit further south. I think it was a little bit south of Chehalis, but I know there are trails out there, and I know specifically we were asked to support something to try to connect Thurston and Pierce. So I'm just wondering, how does that look for the future?
When we surveyed in 2021, the priority of the respondents was to focus on expanding the network within Thurston County first to serve internal mobility within the county. Secondarily, looking for opportunities beyond Thurston County. We have one clearly identified, and that's the City of Yelm's Yelm Prairie Line Trail. TRPC, I think it was back in 2001, awarded Yelm funding to acquire railroad right-of-way from City of Yelm to the town of Roy in Pierce County. And Pierce County just completed a feasibility study for what it would take to construct that segment from the Nisqually River to the town of Roy. I believe it's like a $6 million project. And I just met with Yelm staff yesterday to talk about, hey, maybe this is a legislative priority to talk about how Thurston County local governments and Pierce County local governments could partner to make this a legislative request, to make this a funding priority. I think you were talking about the Willapa Hills Trail in Lewis County. We didn't identify anything in the trails plan, but as someone who uses that trail, yeah, it'd be great to have a connection from Thurston County down to Lewis County. That's going to take more coordination between Thurston County and Lewis County to make something like that happen. What would be the right-of-way that would be available, and how would that get financed in Thurston County and in Lewis County to make that happen? Those are very aspirational opportunities. Mason County, I really don't have a lot of feedback there, but yeah, it's something we could look at, and perhaps the next plan update in 5 years, we'll need to take a closer look at those county-to-county connections.
If we connected to Roy, how much, like, how large is that trail that then you're connected to? Like, how many more miles would that open up? You know?
I want to say it's a few miles, maybe 3 to 4, maybe
Okay,
a little bit more.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have about 5 minutes left. I appreciate Paul and TRPC's work, and I'm, of course, a big advocate for all this. I want all the things, everything on there. I want that. So, you know, whatever I can do to help. We have public works staff here. Do you all have any comments or thoughts, or
No.
just hanging out?
Well, Jennifer Walker, Public Works Director. I think that internally for Public Works, we know that there's a desire from the board and from our community to do more with our parks and trails. And I think that there's always that tension and that struggle of maximizing the resources that we have. So when I hear this, it's exciting, and at the same time, it's also, I don't have any more resources, we don't have any more people. And so there's that tension that exists there, that we have people that love the work that they do, that work on the parks and trails, and that do a really, really good job. But there are a finite amount of resources that we have to be able to move forward on some of these things. And that same tension exists with the existing money that we use and rely on for our road transportation improvements, that we do add pedestrian facilities, active transportation for. So even if we do the set aside, and it was nice to hear that you're talking more of like $1 million, because when we introduce federal money into our capital projects, we're usually not looking at that for anything less than 500,000, more like $1 million. So, but then what work are we not going to do because that funding's not available for transportation? So.
Thank you.
I have one last closing remark. I brought a box of bike maps, Thurston County bike maps, that perhaps your employee transportation coordinator could hand out to staff here as part of your commute trip reduction program, as well as offer to community members who come do business here at Thurston County's office. So enjoy.
Thank you, Paul. All right, thank you. We will close this session, and we have another one starting in 2 minutes.